Eleanor Whitmore had everything money could buy: a mansion, a successful company, and a reputation that opened every door in high society. But when a storm destroyed her roof and no contractor would touch the job, she was forced to hire the one man who said yes, a black handyman named Marcus Reed, who would challenge everything she thought she knew about herself. What started as a simple repair job became a dangerous game of hearts, where Eleanor had to choose between the comfortable prejudices of her upbringing and a love that could destroy her social standing forever. Her own mother would soon arrive with ultimatums that could tear them apart, while anonymous threats tried to drive Marcus away from the only woman who had ever seen past the color of his skin. In a world where love doesn't recognize boundaries but society demands them, Eleanor was about to discover that the most dangerous renovations happen to the human heart. If you're watching this incredible story of forbidden love and second chances, hit that subscribe button and tell me where you're watching from. I want to know if love truly conquers all in your part of the world. Eleanor Whitmore woke to the sound of water dripping onto her hardwood floor. At first, she thought it was rain against the windows. But the steady plop, plop, plop came from directly above her bed. She opened her eyes to see a dark stain spreading across her bedroom ceiling, water collecting in an ugly brown puddle. No, no, no. She threw back her covers and grabbed her phone. 6:15 in the morning, and already her day was ruined. The storm outside had been going since midnight. Wind howled through the old oak trees surrounding her family's estate, and rain hammered the roof like angry fists. She'd grown up in this house, but lately it felt like it was falling apart around her. Eleanor pulled on her robe and hurried upstairs to the attic. Water poured through a hole in the roof, soaking the insulation and wooden beams. The electrical box nearby sparked and hissed. She jumped back, heart pounding. This wasn't just a leak anymore. This was dangerous. By 8 o'clock, she'd called 6 contractors. The first 3 wouldn't even come out in the storm. The 4th took one look at the damage over video chat and shook his head. "Lady, that's a mess. You need someone who knows old houses and electrical work. That's liability I don't want." The 5th contractor quoted her $15,000 and a 3-month wait. The 6th hung up when she mentioned the electrical problems. Eleanor sat at her kitchen table, staring at her phone. Water still dripped upstairs, probably ruining more of the house every minute. She was the CEO of a successful marketing firm, used to solving problems with phone calls and money. But money couldn't fix what no one would touch. Her phone rang. Sam Ortega, the property manager who handled several estates in the area. "Eleanor, I heard about your roof trouble. Mrs. Patterson down the road mentioned it. Word travels fast." She rubbed her temples. "I can't find anyone willing to take the job. I might know someone, Marcus Reed. He's good with old houses and electrical work. Did beautiful restoration on the Miller place last year." Eleanor had driven past the Miller house recently. It looked perfect, like something from a magazine. Why didn't anyone else mention him? Sam paused. He's picky about his jobs, doesn't advertise much, works mostly through recommendations. "Can you call him?" "I'll try, but Eleanor..." Sam's voice carried a warning she didn't understand. "Just keep an open mind, okay?" 3 hours later, Eleanor stood at her front window watching a pickup truck come up the long driveway. It was older but well-maintained, tools organized neatly in the back. A man got out, and Eleanor felt her stomach tighten. Marcus Reed was black. She watched him look up at the house, taking in the damaged roof and the tarp someone had hastily thrown over the worst spots. He moved with quiet confidence, no hurry in his steps. He wore work clothes that had seen use but weren't sloppy: jeans, boots, a jacket that looked warm and practical. Eleanor's chest felt tight. She told herself it was just surprise. Sam should have mentioned. What exactly? That Marcus was black? Why did that matter? But it did matter, and she hated that it did. She opened the front door before he could knock. "Mr. Reed?" "Yes, ma'am. Sam Ortega said you had roof and electrical trouble." His voice was calm, professional. He didn't step onto the porch without permission. I do. She stayed in the doorway. Several contractors have already turned down the job. Mind if I take a look? Eleanor hesitated. Something about having him inside the house felt different. Wrong. The feeling made her stomach turn because she knew where it came from. Her mother's voice, years of subtle comments, learned fears that had nothing to do with Marcus Reed himself. Of course, she said finally. Marcus followed her through the house to the attic stairs. He didn't comment on the expensive furniture or family portraits lining the walls. In the attic, he crouched near the electrical box with a small flashlight, studying the damage without touching anything. How long has the roof been leaking? He asked. This is the first big leak, but I've noticed small stains before. He nodded, then spent 20 minutes examining everything. The hole in the roof, the damaged beams, the water trails down the walls. He took pictures and made notes on a small pad. What do you think? Eleanor asked when he finished. It's fixable. Roof patch first to stop the water, then electrical work to make it safe, then proper roof repair and interior restoration. He looked at her directly. But it's not a small job. How much? $4,000 for emergency repairs and electrical safety. Another $6,000 for permanent roof work and finishing the inside. Eleanor blinked. That's much less than others quoted. I work alone, keep my overhead low, and I price jobs fair. Other contractors had quoted twice that amount, when they'd quote at all. How long would it take? Emergency work today if you want. Rest of it over the next 2 weeks. She studied his face, looking for some catch. Some reason this was too good to be true. But Marcus Reed just waited patiently for her answer. Why do you want this job? The question came out harder than she'd intended. Marcus's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes. Because your house needs fixing, and I can fix it. Heat rose in Eleanor's cheeks. Her question had sounded like an accusation, and they both knew it. I mean, the other contractors said it was too complicated. Complicated work doesn't scare me. I've been doing this 15 years. Eleanor looked out the attic window at the storm clouds. Water still dripped around them. She needed this fixed, and Marcus Reed was the only person willing to do it. All right. When can you start? Give me an hour to get supplies. I'll have your electricity safe before dark. Marcus was gone for exactly 1 hour. When he returned, he unloaded his truck with efficient movements. Ladders, tarps, tools, electrical supplies. Everything looked professional and well-maintained. Ruth Carter, the estate's housekeeper, appeared at Eleanor's elbow as they watched through the kitchen window. Sam vouched for him, Ruth said quietly. She'd worked for the family for 12 years and had strong opinions about people. I know. He's got a good reputation. Eleanor glanced at Ruth. You know him. Know of him. Did my neighbor's porch 2 years ago. She said he was reliable and fair. Why didn't Sam mention that he was? Eleanor trailed off. Black? Ruth's voice held no judgment, just fact. I just wasn't expecting. Expecting what? A black man to be good at his job? The words hit like a slap. Eleanor wanted to deny it, to say that wasn't what she meant. But Ruth had worked for her family long enough to know better. I'll be in my office, Eleanor said stiffly. But she couldn't concentrate on work. Through her window, she watched Marcus set up tarps and safety equipment. He moved up the ladder like he belonged there, no wasted motion or uncertainty. When the rain picked up again, he adjusted his setup and kept working. When a neighbor stopped to gawk at the damage, Marcus answered questions politely, but didn't stop what he was doing. Around 4 o'clock, Eleanor heard voices outside. She looked out to see her neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, talking to Marcus near his truck. I don't know what Eleanor was thinking, Mrs. Patterson was saying. Hiring someone like you for such an important job. Eleanor's blood went cold. Mrs. Patterson's tone made her meaning crystal clear. Marcus straightened slowly. When he spoke, his voice stayed level and calm. Mrs. Whitmore hired me because I can do the work, and I'm going to do it well. I just think she should be more careful about who she lets on the property. Mrs. Whitmore seems like a smart woman who can make her own decisions. The quiet dignity in his voice made Eleanor's throat tight. He could have gotten angry. He could have defended himself in ways that would have made Mrs. Patterson uncomfortable. Instead, he defended Eleanor while keeping his own dignity intact. Mrs. Patterson huffed and walked away. Marcus went back to work like nothing had happened. That evening, Eleanor found herself staring at the electrical panel in her basement. All the switches were clearly labeled in Marcus's neat handwriting. Attic repair, kitchen, master bedroom. The main power was steady for the first time in weeks. She'd been wrong about him. Not just wrong. She'd been unfair in a way that made her stomach hurt. The next morning, she met him in the driveway with coffee and an apology that felt clumsy on her tongue. Mr. Reed, I want to apologize for yesterday. I was. My attitude wasn't professional. Marcus accepted the coffee but studied her face carefully. Thank you. I have some rules for working in the house. The words came out more formal than she'd intended. No loud music before 9 or after 6. Clean up work areas each evening, and I'd prefer if you used the back entrance. Something flickered across Marcus's expression. Hurt, maybe, or resignation. But he just nodded. Understood. Ruth appeared with a plate of warm biscuits. Thought you might be hungry, she said to Marcus. It's going to be a long day. Thank you, ma'am. That's very kind. Eleanor watched Ruth beam at his politeness and felt another twist of discomfort. Ruth treated him like a welcome guest. Eleanor treated him like a risk to be managed. The day passed quietly. Marcus worked on the roof and electrical systems with steady focus. He cleaned up his work areas without being reminded and was polite to Ruth when she brought him lunch. Around 5 o'clock, Eleanor was in her kitchen when she heard voices from the backyard. Through the window, she saw Marcus talking on his phone while packing tools. No, the homeowner's been fine, he was saying. Professional. The house is beautiful, needs a lot of work, but good bones. A pause. She's not what I expected either. Seems like she's trying to be fair. Eleanor realized he was defending her to whoever he was talking to, just like he'd defended her to Mrs. Patterson. The thought made her chest feel strange. That evening, she found herself walking through her house differently. The new electrical work was clean and safe. The roof patch had stopped all the leaks. Marcus Reed had done exactly what he'd promised, and he'd done it well. She also found herself thinking about his calm response to Mrs. Patterson, about the careful way he'd accepted her rules without argument, about the fact that he was defending her to other people while she'd spent the day feeling awkward about having him in her house. Eleanor sat on her couch that night, looking around at the home she'd inherited. It was beautiful and expensive, and filled with family history. But for the first time, she wondered what that history included that she'd never questioned. And she wondered what kind of person she was becoming that a good man's skill and kindness could make her so uncomfortable. The roof didn't leak anymore, but something else felt broken now, and Eleanor wasn't sure Marcus Reed could fix that. The next morning, Eleanor woke to sunlight streaming through her bedroom windows. For the first time in months, no water dripped from the ceiling. The house felt different, quieter, more settled. She found Marcus already working in the attic, replacing damaged insulation. He'd been there since 7, according to Ruth, who seemed to have appointed herself his unofficial hostess. Morning, Eleanor said from the attic doorway. Marcus looked up from his work. Morning. How did the repairs hold up overnight? Perfect. Not a single drip. Something that might have been satisfaction crossed his face. Good. Today I'll finish the interior electrical work, then start on the permanent roof repairs. Eleanor nodded and started to leave, then stopped. Mr. Reed? Yes? Yesterday, when Mrs. Patterson. What she said wasn't right. Marcus set down his tools and looked at her directly. No, it wasn't. I should have said something. Should have. His voice was still calm, but there was steel underneath now. But you didn't. The words hung between them like a challenge. Eleanor felt heat rise in her cheeks. I was surprised. I didn't know what to say. There's always something to say when someone's being treated wrong. Question is whether you want to say it. He turned back to his work, and Eleanor understood she'd been dismissed. Not rudely, but firmly. She'd had her chance to stand up for what was right. And she'd failed. Marcus Reed wasn't going to pretend that didn't matter. The day passed awkwardly. Eleanor tried to work in her home office, but she kept hearing Marcus moving around the house, fixing things that had been broken for years. The ceiling fan in the guest room that hadn't worked since she was a teenager. The electrical outlet in the kitchen that sparked sometimes. Problems she'd learned to live with because they seemed too small to bother with. But Marcus fixed them all, methodically and quietly. Around noon, Ruth brought him lunch on the back porch. Eleanor watched from her kitchen window as they talked. Ruth was laughing at something Marcus said, relaxed in a way Eleanor rarely saw anymore. Eleanor's phone rang. Her mother. Eleanor, darling, Mrs. Patterson called me this morning. She said you have some sort of workman staying at the house. Eleanor's grip tightened on the phone. I hired a contractor to fix the roof. She said he was. Helen's voice dropped to a whisper, as if someone might overhear. Well, she was concerned about safety. Safety? You know what I mean. Eleanor did know. The same uncomfortable feeling that had twisted her stomach when she first saw Marcus. The same learned fear that had nothing to do with Marcus himself, and everything to do with ideas planted years ago. The only safety issue was the electrical problems he fixed, Eleanor said carefully. I just think you should be more careful about who you allow in the house. There are so many qualified contractors who all refuse the job. Eleanor. Her mother's tone sharpened. I raised you better than this. The words hit wrong. Eleanor looked out the window at Marcus, who was measuring something with careful precision, while Ruth held the other end of his tape measure. You raised me to judge people by their work, Eleanor said, and his work is excellent. That's not what I meant, and you know it. I have to go, Mother. I have calls to make. Eleanor hung up and immediately felt guilty. She'd never spoken to her mother that way. But something about watching Marcus work with quiet dignity while people questioned his presence made her angry. That afternoon, the power went out. Eleanor was on a conference call when her computer screen went black. She checked the electrical panel. Everything looked normal. Through her window, she could see other houses on the road still had power. She found Marcus in the basement, studying the main electrical feed. Storm damaged the connection from the street, he said. I can see the problem, but I need to call the power company. It's on their side of the meter. How long will that take? Could be hours, maybe overnight if they're busy with storm damage. Eleanor's stomach dropped. She had client presentations to finish, emails to send, calls to make. Her whole evening was planned around having power. Is there anything else you can do? Marcus shook his head. Not safely. Have to wait for them. By 6 o'clock, the power company still hadn't arrived. The house grew dark and cold as the sun set. Eleanor's laptop battery had died. Her phone was at 15%, and she felt completely disconnected from her work. Ruth had gone home hours ago, leaving Eleanor alone with Marcus, who continued working on interior repairs that didn't require electricity. You don't have to stay, Eleanor told him as he worked by flashlight in the dining room. Job's not finished. But without power, there's plenty I can do, and someone should be here when the power company arrives. Eleanor wasn't sure what to do with herself. She wandered through the dark house, feeling useless. Finally, she found herself back in the dining room, where Marcus was installing a new light fixture. "Can I hold the flashlight?" she asked. Marcus glanced at her, surprised. "Sure." For the next hour, Eleanor held the light while Marcus worked. They barely talked, but something about the shared task felt comfortable. When he needed a different tool, she anticipated it. When he needed better light angle, she adjusted without being asked. "You're good at this," Marcus said as he connected the final wires. Holding a flashlight, paying attention, knowing what's needed. Eleanor felt oddly pleased by the compliment. "I'm usually better at giving orders than taking them." "Most bosses are." "Is that what you think I am? Just another boss?" Marcus paused in his work. "Aren't you?" The question stung because it was fair. She had hired him, set rules for him, kept him at arm's length. But sitting in the dark, working together, it felt different. "I don't want to be," she said quietly. Marcus looked at her in the flashlight beam. Want to be and being are different things. Before Eleanor could respond, headlights flashed outside. The power company had finally arrived. 2 hours later, the lights came back on. The house felt warm and bright again, but something had shifted. Eleanor found herself reluctant to end the evening, even though Marcus was packing his tools. "Are you hungry?" she asked as he loaded his truck. Ruth left soup in the refrigerator. Marcus stopped what he was doing. "You offering to feed me?" "I'm offering to heat soup. There's enough for 2 people." He studied her face like he was trying to solve a puzzle. "Your rules said back entrance only." Eleanor felt her cheeks burn. "My rules were stupid." "Were they? Or are they just different now because you needed my help?" The words hit like cold water. Eleanor opened her mouth to deny it, then stopped. Was that what this was? Was she being nice because she'd needed him tonight? "I don't know," she said honestly. "Maybe. But I'd like to find out." Marcus considered this for a long moment. "Soup sounds good." They ate in Eleanor's kitchen at the small table where Ruth usually had her lunch. The soup was simple, chicken and vegetables, but it tasted better than anything Eleanor had eaten in weeks. "How long have you been doing this work?" Eleanor asked. 15 years. Started helping my uncle when I was 20. "Do you like it?" Marcus smiled for the first time since she'd met him. "I like making things work again. Taking something broken and putting it back together better than it was. That's what you're doing here." "Trying to." They talked about the house, about the work still needed, about Marcus's other projects. Eleanor found herself relaxing in a way she hadn't in months. Marcus was easy to talk to when she stopped treating him like a problem to be managed. "Why did you take this job?" she asked as they finished eating. Marcus was quiet for a moment. "Honestly, Sam said you needed help, and I had the time, but also..." He looked around the kitchen. "This is a beautiful house. Houses like this deserve to be cared for. Even when the owner doesn't deserve it. Everyone deserves a chance to do better." Eleanor felt tears prick her eyes unexpectedly. What if they don't know how? Then they learn. One day at a time. That night, Eleanor lay in bed thinking about Marcus's words. One day at a time. She'd spent so much of her life being afraid of making mistakes, afraid of disappointing her family, afraid of stepping outside the careful boundaries that kept her safe. But those boundaries had also kept her lonely. The next morning, she made coffee for 2 and met Marcus in the driveway. "Thank you," she said, handing him a mug. "For last night, for staying." "You're welcome." "And Marcus?" She took a deep breath. "I want you to use the front door from now on." He studied her face. "You sure about that?" "No, but I'm going to try it anyway." Marcus smiled, a real smile this time, warm and genuine. "One day at a time?" One day at a time. As the days passed, Eleanor found herself looking forward to Marcus's arrival each morning. He always came at 7:30 exactly, never late, never rushing. He greeted Ruth with genuine warmth, and Eleanor with careful politeness that was slowly thawing into something friendlier. The work progressed steadily. The roof was completely repaired, the electrical system updated and safe. Marcus moved through the house like he belonged there, fixing things Eleanor hadn't even known were broken. But more than that, his presence seemed to settle something in the house itself. The rooms felt warmer, more lived in. Eleanor found herself spending more time in the common areas, less time hiding in her office. One afternoon, she was reviewing contracts on her laptop when she heard laughter from the kitchen. She looked up to see Marcus and Ruth examining something on Ruth's phone. "My granddaughter," Ruth was saying. "She's learning to play piano." "Beautiful little girl," Marcus said. "How old?" 7. Smart as a whip and twice as stubborn. Eleanor watched them talk, saw the easy affection between them. Ruth treated Marcus like family, and he responded with the same warmth. When had Eleanor stopped having conversations like that? When had she become so careful, so guarded, that genuine connection felt foreign? That evening, as Marcus packed his tools, Eleanor made a decision. "Would you like to stay for dinner?" she asked. Marcus looked surprised. "You cooking?" "God, no. But there's a good Italian place that delivers. If you don't mind eating takeout. Takeout's fine." They ate pasta and talked about everything except the obvious tension that still existed between them. Marcus told stories about other restoration projects, about clients who'd become friends. Eleanor found herself talking about her work, about the challenges of running a business she'd inherited rather than built. "Do you enjoy it?" Marcus asked. "I'm good at it." "That's not the same thing." Eleanor pushed food around her plate. "I never really thought about what I wanted to do. There was always this expectation that I'd take over the company. Expectations can be heavy." "Yours too?" Marcus nodded. "Different kind, but yeah. When you're black in construction, you have to be twice as good to get half the respect. Every job is a test." "Is that why you work alone?" "Partly, but also because I like the control. When it's just me, the quality is exactly what I make it." Eleanor understood that feeling. "I've been alone most of my life, but lately, it feels more like isolation than independence." "What's the difference?" "Independence is choosing to be alone. Isolation is being alone because you're afraid of everything else." Marcus looked at her with something that might have been understanding. Fear's a hard habit to break, especially when you're not sure what you're afraid of. "You afraid of me?" The question hung in the air between them. Eleanor wanted to say no immediately, but honesty seemed more important than comfort. "Sometimes," she said quietly. "Not because of anything you've done. Because of things I was taught to think before I ever met you." "And now?" Eleanor looked at Marcus across her kitchen table. This man who'd worked in her house for a week, who'd fixed things others couldn't fix, who'd treated her with respect even when she hadn't earned it. "Now I'm more afraid of staying the person I used to be." Something shifted in Marcus's expression. The careful politeness softened into something warmer, more real. "Change is scary," he said, "but necessary. Sometimes." They finished dinner in comfortable silence. As Marcus prepared to leave, Eleanor felt reluctant to end the evening. "Marcus." "Yeah?" "Thank you for giving me a chance to do better." He smiled. "Thank you for taking it." After he left, Eleanor sat in her kitchen thinking about the past week, about how much had changed, how much hadn't, about the person she'd been when Marcus first arrived and the person she was becoming. It wasn't enough yet. She knew that. Real change would take more than sharing a few meals and admitting her mistakes, but it was a start. And for the first time in years, Eleanor felt hopeful about tomorrow. Eleanor woke the next morning to silence. No hammering, No footsteps on the roof. No sound of Marcus's truck in the driveway. She checked her phone. 8:15. He was always here by 7:30. She made coffee and waited, but by 9 o'clock, Marcus still hadn't arrived. Eleanor tried calling, but his phone went straight to voicemail. Ruth found her pacing in the kitchen. He probably had an emergency with another job, Ruth said reasonably. These things happen. But Eleanor felt uneasy. Marcus was reliable. If he couldn't come, he would have called. Around 10, Sam Ortega's truck pulled up the driveway. Eleanor met him at the front door. "Morning, Eleanor. Is Marcus here?" "No, I haven't heard from him since yesterday." Sam's expression grew concerned. "That's not like him. He was supposed to start a job at my place this morning. Never showed, never called." Eleanor's chest tightened. "Should we check on him?" "I was thinking the same thing." They drove to Marcus's apartment in Sam's truck. It was a modest complex on the other side of town. Well-maintained but clearly affordable housing. Marcus's truck was in the parking lot. Sam knocked on the door. After a moment, it opened, and Marcus appeared. He looked tired, worn down in a way Eleanor had never seen. "Sam, what's going on?" "You didn't show up for work, either place. We were worried." Marcus's eyes flicked to Eleanor, then back to Sam. "Sorry. Should have called. You sick?" Something like that. Marcus stepped aside reluctantly. "Come in." The apartment was small but immaculate. Everything had a place, and everything was in its place. It reminded Eleanor of Marcus's work. Careful, orderly, thoughtful. "What's wrong?" Sam asked directly. Marcus sat heavily on his couch. "Got a call last night, after I left Eleanor's place." Eleanor felt dread settle in her stomach. "What kind of call?" "Anonymous. Someone who saw my truck at your house all week. Told me I should be more careful about where I work. Said some neighborhoods aren't safe for people like me." Sam swore under his breath. Eleanor felt sick. "They know where I live," Marcus continued quietly. "Described my truck, my license plate. Said if I valued my safety, I'd find work somewhere else." "That's a threat," Eleanor said. "We should call the police." Marcus laughed, but there was no humor in it. "And tell them what? Someone called to warn me about working in a rich white neighborhood? They'd probably agree with the caller." "You can't just let this go." "Can't I?" Marcus looked at her directly. "This is my life. Eleanor, I know how these things work." Eleanor wanted to argue, but the exhaustion in Marcus's voice stopped her. This wasn't theoretical for him. This was the reality he lived with every day. "The work's almost finished anyway," Marcus said. "Maybe it's better to just move on." "No." The word came out stronger than Eleanor intended. "You can't let them win." "Easy for you to say. You're not the one they threatened." Eleanor felt heat rise in her cheeks. "You're right. I'm sorry, I don't want you to leave because of this." "Why?" The simple question caught her off guard. Why did it matter so much? A week ago, she'd been uncomfortable having Marcus in her house. Now the thought of him leaving because someone had threatened him made her feel physically ill. "Because what we've been doing matters," she said finally. "Because I've been learning things about myself, about how I want to live, and because you don't deserve to be treated this way." Marcus studied her face. "What are you learning?" Eleanor glanced at Sam, who was pretending not to listen while examining Marcus's bookshelf. "That I've been living in a very small world. That I've accepted things I shouldn't accept. That I want to be braver than I've been." "Brave enough to do what?" "I don't know yet. But I want to find out." Sam cleared his throat. "Marcus, I've got 3 more jobs lined up for you this month. Good people, fair pay. Don't let one coward with a phone ruin that." Marcus was quiet for a long moment. I need to think about it. Fair enough, but don't take too long. Eleanor's house isn't going to finish itself. On the drive back, Sam was unusually quiet. Finally, he said, "This kind of thing happen often." "More than it should," Sam replied grimly. "Most people are decent, but it only takes one or two to make life difficult." Eleanor thought about Mrs. Patterson's comments, about her mother's phone call, about her own first reaction when she'd seen Marcus get out of his truck. How does he stand it? Same way anyone stands unfairness. You develop thick skin, choose your battles, and try not to let it make you bitter. Has Marcus had problems before? Some. Nothing this direct. Usually it's just people assuming he's not qualified or treating him like he's invisible. The threat. Sam shook his head. That's new. Eleanor spent the rest of the day thinking about Marcus sitting alone in his apartment, weighing whether it was safe to continue working at her house. The thought made her furious, not just at whoever had called him, but at herself for being part of a world where such calls were possible. That evening, she drove back to Marcus's apartment. He answered the door looking surprised. "Eleanor, everything okay? Can we talk?" Marcus hesitated, then stepped aside to let her in. Eleanor sat on the edge of his couch, trying to find the right words. "I've been thinking about what you said, about this being your life, your decision. And? You're right. But it's my life too, in a way. My house, my neighborhood, my responsibility." Marcus sat across from her. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I can't make the decision for you, but I can make decisions for myself. Such as..." Eleanor took a deep breath. "Such as not hiding anymore, not pretending that what happened to you doesn't affect me, not staying quiet when people say things like Mrs. Patterson said. That's a big change. Maybe it's time for a big change." Marcus leaned back in his chair. "What would that look like?" "I don't know exactly, but I know I don't want to be the kind of person who lets fear make her decisions. And I don't want to live in a world where good people get threatened for doing good work. The world doesn't change just because you want it to. No, but maybe small pieces of it can change, starting with my piece." They sat in silence for a while. Eleanor could see Marcus weighing her words, trying to decide what they meant. "If I come back," he said finally, "things might get more difficult. For both of us." "I know. You ready for that?" Eleanor thought about her comfortable life, her careful routines, her habit of avoiding conflict. "I'm ready to try." Marcus smiled, not the polite, professional smile he'd worn when they first met, but something warmer and more real. "Okay then, one day at a time." One day at a time. Marcus returned to work the next morning. Eleanor met him in the driveway with coffee and a determination she hadn't felt in years. "What's the plan for today?" she asked. "Finish the trim work in the dining room. Install the new fixtures in the guest bathroom." "Need any help?" Marcus looked surprised. "You offering to hold more flashlights?" "I'm offering to learn, if you don't mind teaching." For the next few hours, Eleanor learned how to use a level, how to measure twice and cut once, how to tell the difference between a Phillips head screwdriver and a flathead. Marcus was a patient teacher, correcting her mistakes without making her feel stupid. Around noon, Mrs. Patterson appeared in the backyard. "Eleanor, dear, I need to speak with you." Eleanor's stomach tightened, but she kept her voice level. "Of course. What can I do for you?" Mrs. Patterson glanced at Marcus, who continued working on the bathroom fixture, privately. "I'm helping with the renovation today. Can we talk here?" Mrs. Patterson's mouth pinched. "I really think we should speak alone." "I'm comfortable talking here." Mrs. Patterson looked frustrated, but she lowered her voice. "I heard there was some trouble yesterday, about your contractor." Eleanor felt Marcus go still, though he didn't stop working. What kind of trouble? Someone called him. Warned him about working in this neighborhood. Who told you that? It doesn't matter who. The point is, maybe this is a sign that you should find someone more appropriate. Eleanor set down her tools and looked directly at Mrs. Patterson. Marcus is the most qualified contractor I've ever worked with. He's professional, skilled, and reliable. There's nothing inappropriate about him except other people's prejudices. Mrs. Patterson's eyes widened. Eleanor, I'm trying to help you. No, you're not. You're trying to make me as uncomfortable as you are with change. That's not. Mrs. Patterson. Eleanor's voice stayed calm, but there was steel underneath. Marcus is welcome in my home and on my property. Anyone who has a problem with that is welcome to stay off my property. Mrs. Patterson stared at her for a moment, then turned and stalked away. Eleanor realized her hands were shaking. She'd never spoken to a neighbor like that, never taken such a direct stand. It felt terrifying and exhilarating at the same time. You okay? Marcus asked quietly. I think so. That was new for me. How did it feel? Eleanor considered the question. Scary, but right. Marcus nodded. Right usually is scary at first. They worked together for the rest of the afternoon. Eleanor was clumsy with the tools, slow to understand the techniques, but Marcus remained patient. More than that, he seemed to enjoy teaching her. You're getting better, he said, as she successfully installed a cabinet handle on her third try. I have a good teacher. You have good instincts. You just needed practice. As the day ended, Eleanor realized she felt more accomplished than she had in months. Her hands were dirty, her back ached from unfamiliar work, and she'd probably slowed Marcus down considerably. But she'd also stood up for what was right and learned something new. Thank you, she told Marcus as he packed his tools. For what? For letting me help, for being patient with me, for coming back. Marcus paused in his packing. Thank you for making it worth coming back to. That evening, Eleanor called her mother. Eleanor, darling, how are you? I'm good, Mother. The renovation is almost finished. Oh, wonderful. And that person is gone? Eleanor took a deep breath. His name is Marcus Reed, and no, he's not gone. He's an excellent contractor and a good man. Silence on the other end of the line. Eleanor, I'm concerned about your judgment lately. My judgment is fine. Better than it's been in years, actually. You're not thinking clearly. People will talk. Let them talk. I'm tired of living my life based on what people might say. That's not how we were raised. No, it's not. But maybe it's how I should have been raised. Another silence, longer this time. I think I should come visit, Helen said finally. Next week. Eleanor's stomach dropped. Her mother's visits were always tests, inspections of Eleanor's life to make sure she was maintaining proper standards. That's not necessary, Mother. I think it is. I'll be there Tuesday. The line went dead. Eleanor stared at her phone, already dreading the confrontation she knew was coming. But as she looked around her house, the steady lights, the solid walls, the rooms that felt warm and alive again, she realized something had changed. For the first time in her life, she was more afraid of disappointing herself than disappointing her mother. It was a start. Tuesday morning arrived gray and cold. Eleanor stood at her kitchen window, watching for her mother's car while Marcus worked in the guest room upstairs. She'd warned him that Helen was coming, seen the way his expression had shuddered. Maybe I should work somewhere else today, he'd said. No, this is your job site. You belong here. But now, hearing the crunch of gravel in the driveway, Eleanor wondered if she'd made a mistake. Helen Whitmore stepped out of her silver Mercedes like she was arriving for battle. Perfectly dressed, perfectly composed, and already disapproving. Eleanor met her at the front door. "Hello, Mother." Helen's hug was brief and cold. "Eleanor, you look tired." "I've been working with my hands. It's different from sitting at a desk all day." Helen's eyebrows rose. "Working with your hands?" "Learning some basic carpentry. Marcus has been teaching me." "Marcus?" "The contractor. He's upstairs finishing the guest bathroom." Helen's lips pressed into a thin line. "I see." They moved into the living room, where Helen examined everything with sharp eyes. The work Marcus had done was beautiful. Crown molding restored, walls perfectly painted, floors refinished to their original luster. But Helen wasn't looking at the quality of the work. "How much longer will this take?" she asked. "A few more days. Marcus is very thorough." "I'm sure he is." Helen's tone carried implications Eleanor didn't want to examine. "Eleanor, we need to discuss your recent behavior." "My behavior?" "Mrs. Patterson called me. She's concerned about your choices." Eleanor felt heat rise in her chest. "My choices are my own business. Not when they affect the family reputation. How does hiring a skilled contractor affect our reputation?" Helen sat on the edge of the sofa like she might need to leave quickly. "You know perfectly well what I'm talking about. This man has been here for weeks. People are starting to wonder about your judgment." "My judgment is fine." "Is it? You're spending time alone with a stranger." "He's not a stranger. He's a professional doing professional work." "Eleanor." Helen's voice dropped to the tone she'd used when Eleanor was a child caught misbehaving. "I raised you better than this." Before Eleanor could respond, footsteps sounded on the stairs. Marcus appeared in the doorway, tool bag in hand. "Excuse me," he said politely. "Just need to get some supplies from my truck." Helen's entire body went rigid. Eleanor watched her mother take in Marcus's height, his dark skin, his work clothes. The silence stretched until it became uncomfortable. "Marcus," Eleanor said. "This is my mother, Helen Whitmore." "Mother, this is Marcus Reed." Marcus stepped forward with his hand extended. "Pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Whitmore." Helen looked at his hand like it might contaminate her. After a moment that felt like an hour, she gave him the briefest possible handshake. "Mr. Reed." Her voice was arctic. "Your daughter has a beautiful home. The restoration work has been a pleasure." "I'm sure it has." Marcus's expression didn't change, but Eleanor saw something shift in his eyes. The same careful politeness he'd worn when they first met. "I'll be outside if you need anything," he told Eleanor, and left without another word. As soon as he was gone, Helen turned on Eleanor. That was completely inappropriate. What was inappropriate? He was polite and professional. You introduced him like he was a guest, like he was someone important. He is important. He's done beautiful work on this house. He's the help, Eleanor. There are boundaries. Eleanor stared at her mother. Boundaries? Yes, the kind I taught you when you were growing up. The kind that keep people in their proper places. And what is Marcus's proper place? Not in our living room being introduced like family. The words hit Eleanor like a slap. This was what she'd been raised with. These careful distinctions. These invisible lines that kept some people close and others at a safe distance. Mother, I don't think... Clearly, you're not thinking at all. Helen stood and walked to the window where she could see Marcus loading tools from his truck. Mrs. Patterson told me someone even called to warn him away from the neighborhood. That should tell you something about how people see this situation. It tells me that some people are small-minded and cruel. It tells you that you're making a spectacle of yourself. Eleanor felt something snap inside her chest. A spectacle? By treating someone with respect? By appreciating good work? By getting too familiar with someone who isn't? Appropriate. Appropriate. Eleanor repeated the word like it tasted bad. What makes him inappropriate, Mother? His skin color? his job, his refusal to grovel. Helen's face flushed. Don't put words in my mouth. Then tell me what you mean, specifically. I mean there are natural boundaries between different types of people. Boundaries that exist for good reasons. Such as... Helen struggled for words. Such as... Compatibility, shared backgrounds, common understanding. Marcus and I have plenty of common understanding. Do you? What do you really know about him? About his background, his family, his... past? Eleanor heard the implication clearly. I know he's honest, skilled, and kind. I know he's treated me with more respect than most people in my life. And I know that whatever you're suggesting is based on prejudice, not fact. Prejudice? Helen's voice rose. I'm trying to protect you from making a fool of yourself. By assuming the worst about someone you've known for 5 minutes? By recognizing reality. People like that. Stop. Eleanor's voice came out sharper than she'd ever spoken to her mother. Don't finish that sentence. Helen stared at her. Eleanor Margaret Whitmore, I will not be spoken to that way. And I won't listen to you talk about Marcus that way. Marcus? You're defending him over your own mother? Eleanor looked at Helen, this woman who'd raised her with careful rules and careful fears, who'd taught her to value comfort over courage, appearances over truth. I'm defending what's right. Right. Helen's laugh was bitter. You think this infatuation is right? Infatuation? Don't pretend you don't know what I'm talking about. I can see it in your face when you look at him. You're developing feelings for this man. Eleanor felt her cheeks burn. My feelings are my own business. Not when they're this inappropriate. Eleanor, think about what you're doing. Think about your position, your reputation. Think about the family. I am thinking about the family. I'm thinking about what kind of family I want to be part of. Helen's face went pale. What does that mean? It means I'm tired of living by rules that make me smaller and meaner than I want to be. Those rules protected you. From what? From knowing good people? From treating everyone with dignity? From being brave enough to care about someone? From making mistakes you can't undo? Eleanor stared at her mother. Like what? Like falling in love with someone you think is beneath us. The words hung in the air between them. Eleanor hadn't meant to say them, hadn't even admitted to herself that's what was happening. But now they were out, and she couldn't take them back. Helen's face went through several expressions: shock, horror, disappointment. Eleanor, you cannot be serious. I don't know if I'm serious, but I know I care about him, and I know that your reaction tells me everything I need to know about how I was raised. How you were raised properly. How I was raised to be afraid. To judge people by their race instead of their character. To value what other people think more than what's actually right. Helen stood abruptly. I won't listen to this nonsense. Then don't listen, but don't expect me to change. Helen stared at her for a long moment. If you continue down this path, you'll regret it. The world isn't as kind as you think it is. The world is exactly as kind as we make it. You're being naive. Maybe, or maybe I'm finally being brave. Helen gathered her purse and coat with sharp, angry movements. I'm disappointed in you, Eleanor. Deeply disappointed. I'm disappointed in myself, too, Eleanor said quietly. But not for the reasons you think. After Helen left, Eleanor sat alone in her living room, shaking. She just had the biggest fight of her life with her mother. She'd admitted feelings she wasn't sure she was ready to have, and she'd chosen a path that felt both terrifying and necessary. Through the window, she could see Marcus working on his truck. He'd heard the raised voices, probably heard at least some of what was said. She wondered what he was thinking, whether he regretted coming back to finish the job. Eleanor took a deep breath and walked outside. "I'm sorry," she said as she approached his truck. Marcus looked up from organizing his tools. "For what?" "For my mother. For the things she said. For all of it." "You don't control what other people say." "No, but I control how I respond to it. And I should have been clearer about where I stand." Marcus studied her face. "Where do you stand?" Eleanor felt her heart racing. "I stand with you. I stand with what's right. And I stand with—" She took a breath. "With whatever this is between us." Marcus went very still. "What is this between us?" "I don't know exactly. But I know I care about you. I know I look forward to seeing you every morning. I know that when someone threatened you, it made me angrier than I've ever been. Eleanor, I know you probably think I'm just some sheltered rich woman having some kind of crisis. I think you're someone trying to figure out who she wants to be." Eleanor looked at him. This man who'd spent 2 weeks patiently teaching her about more than carpentry. "And who do you think I want to be?" "Someone braver than the person you used to be." "Is that enough?" Marcus set down his tools and really looked at her. "Depends. How brave are you willing to get?" Eleanor thought about her mother's angry face, about Mrs. Patterson's whispered warnings, about the anonymous phone call that had tried to drive Marcus away. Brave enough to find out what happens if I stop being afraid. That's a dangerous thing to say. Maybe. But living afraid is dangerous too. Marcus stepped closer. "Eleanor, if we do this, if we try this, it's not going to be easy. People are going to talk. Some are going to do worse than talk. I know. Your family might not accept it. I know. You could lose friends, business connections, social standing. I know." Eleanor met his eyes. "But I could also gain something I've never had." "What's that?" "A life I actually want to live." Marcus was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was soft. "I care about you too. More than I should, probably." Eleanor felt something warm spread through her chest. "Why more than you should?" "Because I know how this story usually ends. And it's not with the handyman and the CEO living happily ever after. Maybe it's time for a different story." Marcus smiled, the first real unguarded smile she'd seen from him. "Maybe it is." He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she didn't, he touched her face gently. "You sure about this?" "I'm sure I want to try." Marcus leaned down and kissed her. It was soft, careful, full of questions they were both afraid to ask. When they broke apart, Eleanor felt like the world had shifted on its axis. "Now what?" she whispered. "Now we take it one day at a time. One day at a time." As they stood there in her driveway, Eleanor realized that everything had changed. There was no going back to the careful, lonely life she'd lived before. There would be challenges ahead, difficult conversations, people who wouldn't understand or approve. But for the first time in her life, Eleanor felt like she was moving toward something instead of just maintaining what she had. She was choosing love over fear, growth over comfort, truth over convenience. The house behind them stood solid and beautiful, restored to its original strength. And Eleanor understood that some kinds of renovation happened from the inside out. That sometimes you had to tear down old walls before you could build something better. She looked at Marcus, this man who'd taught her about more than carpentry, and smiled. "Come on," she said, taking his hand. "Let's go home." Together, they walked toward the house that had brought them together, toward whatever came next, one day at a time. The end.